My son, a 14-year-old freshman in high school, shows up ready to learn, does his homework, but when it comes to taking tests, he bombs. It seems like this kid is doing everything right.
Well, you would think. This is really, really common. When kids transition to high school, the way they're most likely to study for tests are the least effective ways to study.
How do I get him to change how he studies?
Okay, so let's lay out the steps.
This week, we're talking about bombing tests. I was a horrible test taker, Lisa.
Well, test taking is a skill unto itself, and it's not one that we necessarily teach. And at this time of year, when finals are coming around, suddenly everybody starts to feel panicked. The kids do, sometimes their folks do, about the fact that it's not clear that my student knows how to actually prepare adequately for tests.
And I just wonder how many of us adults, if we had learned some study skill sets back in the day when they really weren't teaching this kind of thing, could that make us better in our work and life in general?
100%.
So, right? So we're going to dig into the
Yes.
science today. And I can't wait because this is on so many parents' minds because you make the transition from middle school to high school to college. There's a lot there. I want to read you this letter, Lisa. Dear Dr. Lisa and Reena, my son, a 14-year-old freshman in high school, is a great kid, has many friends, great social life, plays on the freshman basketball team. He's an organized kid at home. Room is not messy, keeps his belongings together. He has 2 homes and does a great job remembering what he needs when he makes his transition to each house. In school, the teacher says he is well-liked, shows up ready to learn, does his homework, participates appropriately, is respectful, but when it comes to taking tests, he bombs. I asked him how he's preparing, and he gets frustrated and says he's got it. I try to offer suggestions, and that backfires, but I can see he is struggling. It's as if he thinks if he does the classwork, homework, participates, etc., he should just do well on the tests. To me, it seems as if he's walking in circles in his head, staring at the work, and doesn't know how to study, doesn't know where to start. He wants to do well, though. If it was one subject, I'd just get him a tutor. But it's not that simple. I'm afraid he's missing a critical part of problem solving or executive functioning that will alter his adult life. What can I do to help him? He has so many things going for him. This is the missing link. Help. Lisa, how common is this, especially when you make the transition to high school?
Okay, I'm going to answer that, but okay, just what a great letter. I just want to take a minute. I love what people send us. They are absolutely brilliant letters. And what I'm loving about this letter is the letter writer ruled out all sorts of things I would need to know, right? Is the kid disorganized elsewhere? Is the kid, cutting up in class, right? The letter writer did such a beautiful job of homing in on this. It's the tests. This kid is falling apart on tests, which makes it really easy. I mean, that's not a simple problem, but she has effectively, I assume it's a mom, I don't know if it's a mom, the letter writer has effectively ruled out all of the other things that we would go hunting for, the kid isn't paying attention or whatever. It sounds like it's tests. Okay, so I love that this is a 14-year-old boy transitioning to high school because I think this is really, really common when kids transition to high school. Suddenly, and you know this, you've got a 9th grader, the nature of schoolwork changes and suddenly there are finals, right? And I'm thinking about families who are getting ready for finals right now. And, or the family get ready for their kid to take finals, embracing for it. And the stakes go up on tests, whereas in middle school, and this kid actually may have been fine in middle school. Maybe the tests aren't that big a deal, or they basically repeat things that the kid has already had drilled into them. The transition to high school does and should involve tests taking on new weight and tests becoming more complicated. Often it's tests asking students to work with material in new ways, to, apply concepts in ways they haven't in class already. So it's not at all unusual to see kids who have been sort of chugging along, just fine academically, suddenly get to high school and have a big hiccup around their ability to take tests. It's not that rare.
Hey there, we are really trying to get the Ask Lisa podcast out to as many families as possible. And one of the ways you can help us right now, if you can just hit the like button on what you're watching, subscribe to our YouTube channel, and then post a comment in the comment section. Every bit of interaction actually helps us reach more families who also might need this support. Okay, now back to our episode. So what's your advice here? Because it seems like this kid is doing everything right.
Well, he may be doing school. He may be doing the day-to-day of school just fine. I want to throw in one caveat just to think about together before drilling really into what is a kid supposed to do in these situations, or what can a parent try to advise? which is sometimes when I have a family bring a concern like this my way, they're like, you know, incredibly great student who's bombing tests. And then when I you know, scrape away at it a little bit, the incredibly great student is getting A's on the homework and A minuses or B pluses on the tests. And and it may actually be like perfectly fine, perfectly appropriate academically. So I'm going to take this letter at face value that this kid is doing really well academically. And then there's a
Yeah.
huge gap between what he's accomplishing with his homework and what he's turning in on the test. Cause I see that. I know that also happens. But I just want to throw in there bombing, means different things to different people, and
Yeah.
schools will tell you usually if they're worried about your kid. Schools are not usually worried about a kid who's strong on homework and then, gets slightly lower points on
Okay.
tests, and I just wanna
Okay.
think that through. Okay,
Yeah.
so wait, what'd you ask me again? Tell me the question.
Well, I wanna drill into sort of what the parent does here, but I had a
Yeah.
question about first, boys versus girls. When they're starting
Oh,
high school, do you see any difference in gender here?
statistically, we do. Like, when we look
You
at the
do?
data,
Oh,
and we do, and the reason being, Rita, okay, so this kid is 14. Um, One of the rules, and this is shifting in time and getting younger, especially for girls, the modal age of onset for girls of puberty, so the most frequent age at which girls hit puberty is 12. The modal age of onset for boys is 14. This is why ninth grade boys can be shaving and look like, full grown adults, or they can be, they can look like middle schoolers and they can even look like young middle schoolers, right? So you get this huge diversity in ninth grade boys that you don't see in ninth grade girls. That you see some, but like most ninth grade girls have moved, are well into puberty. Puberty comes with neurological growth that makes school different for kids. It lets them, have more intellectual firepower. It lets them understand the consequences of their behaviors in a different kind of way. And so part of what we're up against is that there are plenty of, especially ninth grade boys, who just have not crossed that neurological threshold. And so they just aren't working with the same cognitive equipment as the average girl. Now, of course, kids are all over the map and there's like very immature girls and very mature boys. Like it's not that. But on balance, if you like stopped a ninth grade teacher in the class in the hall and were like, in general, who are your students who like are on top of it, know exactly what to do, and who are less likely to be, they'll be like, oh yeah, the girls in general in the ninth grade are more likely to be on top of
mhm.
it.
I think it was the end of last season. Yeah, it was the end of last season or season ender was a great one about how you were teaching, like, you want the kid to unload the dishwasher, you need to show them. They're not gonna
Yeah.
magically know just because you have been doing it for 30 years doesn't mean they have been, right? If they haven't.
Right.
So, what's the problem here? Is it about executive functioning? Where does this kid even begin to start?
Right. Like where are the wheels coming off here? Right.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's actually not executive functioning. And the reason I know that is, there were several pieces of the letter. Like the room is organized. And actually the thing that I was like, okay, this kid is actually okay on executive functioning, and I'll drill into what executive functioning really is that he's got 2 homes and is moving back and forth between them and has the stuff he needs, and the teachers say he's on top of things in class. So executive functioning, the way we often talk about it, it's like the air traffic control of running your life, right? It's like having things
Okay.
organized.
Okay.
And there's got lots of components, but like some of the big ones are like working memory, right? And this kid is showing working memory. Like I am, which involves planning. So like I'm going to be over at the other house, so I need to take this, this, and this. Okay, so working memory is great. It involves cognitive flexibility, right? Being able to change gears. Again, if a kid can move between 2 homes and knows what to bring and can do stuff, and even in class is able to do this assignment and then that assignment and doing fine on them, that's good. He's in good shape on that. And then another huge category that we talk about with executive functioning, and this one I can really struggle with, is inhibitory control. So it's basically, how like you're like squirrel, right? Like as soon as you're looking at one thing and then you remember like something else you were supposed to do, like I will interrupt myself
Mm.
constantly to like hop into
Mhm.
my calendar or go to my to-do list or make a call when I like
Yes.
really should have just stayed on the thing I was
Yeah.
doing until I was done.
Yeah.
So I actually don't think the issue here is executive functioning, but it's a good rule out, as we say clinically. Like it's a good thing to be like, okay, it's not that. Okay, but then what is it? Okay, so here, my superhero, my academic superhero, and I'm going to draw on his work quite a bit, is this cognitive psychologist named Daniel Willingham. He's at UVA. His work is gorgeous, Reena. This is a brilliant psychologist who has done beautiful, beautiful work on learning and memory, but then translates it so effectively for broad audiences. So he has several books. We'll put them in the show notes. One is Why Don't Students Like School? And it really explains like what it is on the education side that we could be doing differently. And there's another book that I was thinking about here called Outsmart Your Brain. And it's about how to study. It's about how to learn and study,
Oh,
and it's directed
interesting.
at students. And it's brilliant. Outsmart Your Brain is, I think, tipped a little more towards very light high school and then college learning. It's a lot about, taking in lectures, things like that. But the piece that he talks about, and this is so essential, and I want to run us through it. Like, why do kids struggle with tests when they are strong students
Yeah.
overall? He answers that question, and I'm going to share it. I want to separate that from what should this kid be doing from how does the parent get him to do it, right? Those are two different questions.
Good point.
But for starters, like, what should he be doing? Okay, so one of the things that we know about the science of studying is that in general, not just boys, like kids across the board, usually study for tests. The way they're most likely to study for tests are the least effective ways to study. Okay, so Reena, do you remember how you studied? Like, it was time for a test. What did you do?
Yes. Cramming, memorization, a lot of memorization is what I remember.
Okay, memorization like with flashcards or memorization like going over your materials? What were you doing?
I was a big flashcard person in Spanish and history. Yes. And then
Okay.
math, which was my worst subject, I just was doing worksheets over and over again to try to get the concept in.
Okay. So you actually lean towards what most students don't do. Most students reread their notes. They reread the text. They may even rewrite their notes. They may highlight. Like, that's a lot of what kids do. They're like, I'm studying, I'm going over it all, I'm rewriting it all, I'm highlighting key passages.
Yeah, because that kind of gets into your brain, you'd think, right? That's why they're doing it,
Well,
no?
you would think. That's the key word.
Okay.
You would think. So what Willingham is so good at highlighting is you have to actually test memory in order to make memories. You actually have to try to retrieve stuff when it's not right in front of you. And that's why, going over your notes doesn't do much because you're looking at your notes, right? Like, it doesn't get it into your head because it's right there on the paper. And the things that really need to happen, and you did them. I bet there's a way, if you had had good coaching, you could have done them even more. The things that need to happen is actually students need to write the questions they think will be on the test, which is
Ooh,
enormously
okay.
hard to do.
Yeah.
Because looking at your notes versus being asked to apply what you've learned to some novel concept. So they need to use past tests to be like, okay, what are the kinds of questions we get asked? They need to write those out on flashcards or somewhere, and then they need to flip it over and they need to write the whole answer. And then they need to test themselves where they're looking at potential questions and as many as they can across as much of the material as possible. And then they have to try to generate it without looking at any of their notes, right? It's the
That's a
making your
lot,
memory do.
though.
Well, that's the issue.
It's like create the
Yes.
flashcards or whatever that are potential questions, run through them in your mind. That'll help seal the deal. It's a lot. I mean, that is
It's
a
a
lot.
lot. And
Yeah.
that's why students don't do it. And he has this terrific analogy. I think this is so brilliant. I was actually my husband's a teacher. I was like, "You have to listen to this analogy. It's so perfect."
Cool.
So, what he described is the things that you're supposed to do. Like, really, like, I'm gonna sit here and think about what are all the questions the teacher could possibly ask on this material, and then I'm gonna write those down, and then I'm gonna answer those questions, and then I'm gonna write that down, and then I'm gonna quiz myself until I've got it, cold. It's like if you're like, "I wanna get better at push-ups." And the equivalent to what I just described in test preparation is doing super hard push-ups. Like push-ups, those where like where you try to clap in between the push-ups, right?
Yes.
Or you like put one arm behind your back and you try to do the push-ups. Okay, like really, really hard. Who wants to do that, right?
Who can do that? I mean, are you clapping
Or
between your push-ups? Is there something you haven't told
no,
me?
no. But if I wanted to get better at push-ups,
Right.
that
You have
is
to do
what
that.
I would do.
Yeah.
But instead, what I do in the gym and what students do instead is I do the easier thing that feels like something. So I'm like, you know what? I'm just going to bang out a bunch of push-ups on my knees. You know how easy it is to do push-up on, it's not that hard, right? But it feels like
Well,
you're
speak for
doing
yourself,
something.
but okay.
But you know what I mean.
I'm
But
proud
it
of my push-ups
feels
on my
like,
knees.
okay, but like, what if you did them way past what like, it's a matter
Yeah.
of like,
Yeah.
it feels productive. But
Mhm.
relative
Mhm.
to really hard push-ups that are actually gonna improve your push-up skills, it's actually not that productive. And so when students are going over their notes, highlighting the text, they're doing knee push-ups. They're like, "Look, I'm
Mhm.
studying, I'm studying."
Yeah. Yeah.
Whereas what Willingham is saying is, "No, no, no, you gotta be doing clap push-ups, you gotta do one-arm push-ups. Even if it's hard, that's actually how you improve." And so this is, unfortunately for students, this is settled science. Like, no one is debating that the way to prepare for tests is to do the clap push-ups. Now,
Mhm.
this gets to the second problem of like,
Yeah.
but how do you convince a kid to do this, right? So I have a ninth grader. I have a ninth grader
Mhm.
who so far is doing okay on tests.
Mhm.
I have so much empathy for the parent who wrote this letter because if I rolled up on my kid saying, "You know what
Mhm.
you should do is
Mhm.
you
Mhm.
should,
Mhm.
um, sit there and come up with a whole bunch of cards about the kinds of questions that you think, the teacher's gonna ask, and then you gotta write them. And then, if I'm like, "You know what? Clap push-ups going forward," she would actually
Yeah.
roll on the floor laughing. Like, she'd be like, "You gotta
Not
be
gonna
kidding me,
work.
lady.
Yeah.
Not
So
gonna
what do
do it."
you do then? How do we, knowing the science and the research behind it, what's like that? You always talk about half steps. Like, what is that half step we as parents can take to move them in the right direction to get those study skills?
There's 2 assets in this letter that I think the family has to work with. The best asset is I think that what the letter said is, like, he wants to do well, right? This is a
Yes.
kid who already
Motivated.
cares, right? So, like, that gets you, like, to the 10-yard line, right? I mean, if the kid were like, "Yeah, I'm bombing tests and I don't care," okay, now you have a whole other
Mm.
set of problems, and
Mhm.
we've actually done episodes on that, right? Like, when my kid
Yeah.
doesn't care about
Yeah.
school and can I bribe him and all of that. Okay,
Yes.
so the kid cares. So, oh, thank goodness, right? Because this makes it a lot easier.
Yeah.
The other is, and he's doing badly, right? So if he cared and we're doing well, there's no problem. If he were doing badly and didn't care, you've got a big problem. You have a kid who says he cares, but he's actually doing poorly. And there was something in the letter that I thought was um, so lovely, where the parent says, like, he says he's got it. He says he's got it, and yet I'm looking at him struggle, and clearly from the grades, he doesn't have it. Um, so here, I think that there's a couple of ways that parents could walk up to this that actually stand a chance. So the first is starting from the kid's own desire to do well, right? Rather than have it be like, what's going on? You should be getting better grades on your tests, right? You're already down a road of the kid being like, why are you on my case? I'm trying, leave me alone, right? Like, it's just not going to work. So I think that the first overture is to say, hey, buddy, you want to be doing well on the tests. Like, I see that. And I see this is frustrating for you. So you're his ally, not his, push up coach. And then when the kid's like, yeah, 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 I got it. My favorite line that I use clinically is to say, well, but what you're doing isn't working. Like, I say that all the time.
Mm. And that
What you're
works?
doing, it does because it's short, right? And one of the things that I've had happen clinically over the years, is that families come in and they've got a challenge, which is why they're even meeting with me. And they'll describe at length what they're trying, and they'll describe what they're on to now that's, they're trying because the other things haven't worked. And they'll describe, whatever it is, like grounding the kid or sticker charts or whatever. And when it's not working, they'll do more of it. And so I've often
Uh-huh.
said,
Uh-huh.
yeah, yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah, I see how hard everybody is working to try to fix this, but what you're doing isn't working. And then what's an easy follow on is, so you have to try something else, or we're going to have to try something else. So that's where I would go as an opening. Okay, so you also have a ninth grader. Does this feel promising to you as the parent of a real live ninth grader?
Yeah, I think being able to explain what works so it's not trial and error, right? That
Yes.
helps. And saying there is science, people have studied this, here's what works. But I feel like what I'm missing is how do I get him to change how he studies?
Okay, you're bringing to mind something that I think we often blow past that I have found to be absolutely essential. Okay, so if the opening of the conversation is like, kiddo, you want to do well, we know it. And we know it's bugging you that you're not doing as well on the tests as you have in the past or, want to do. And we hear that you feel like you're on top of it, but clearly what you're doing isn't working. The next question to ask is, do you want help with this?
Mm. Mm.
And I'll tell you, Reena, I learned this the hard way. For 20 years, I consulted to a school in my community, a terrific girls' school. And, over 20 years, you come across girls it was a girls' school, who are falling apart academically, for any variety of reasons. And you rule out all the things you got to rule out. Like, is there a learning disorder? Is there an attentional disorder? Like, you take care of all of those things. And then sometimes you get to where, like, no, the kid can do the work, kid's just not doing the work. Or, the interferences are largely within the kid and they're things the kid could control. So one of the things we would do at this school, because it was a resource school and we had a lot of, families that could bring a lot of resources to bear, we would create like these wildly supportive structures. We'd get tutors, we'd get, like special study halls, we'd get all these things and we'd wrap them all around the kid. And sometimes the kid would just continue to sink and sink and sink.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah. And sometimes it was like they didn't want to even go to that school, right? Like sometimes they were like trying to leave. And so before orchestrating with the fabulous team at that school, before orchestrating these elaborate support systems for kids, which I came to think of as like, sometimes I think of these kids like black holes. Like if they did not want the help, they would just suck all of those resources in and it would just disappear. And so sometimes, like when we were having these kind of like pretty intense conversations with the kids, I would be like, okay, so we've ruled out this, this, and this. This seems to be within your power. Do you want help?
Do you want help?
Do you want help? And it was like a transformational question because sometimes the kids would be like, no, I don't want to go to school here. And then you're like, I'm so glad.
So it comes out. And there's another problem to deal with. Yeah.
Exactly,
Yeah.
right? And like throwing resources
good.
at this kid is a waste. And then what was nice is, usually the kid would be like, actually, I do. And now you are in a completely different conversation because you are siding with the part of the kid that wants to fix this. Okay, so let's like lay out the steps because I love this problem. It's so focal and it's so fixable, but you got to go at it right.
Yeah.
Okay,
But as a parent, I feel so overwhelmed and don't know where to start. So walk us through it.
All right.
Great.
So here we are. So we're doing step by step. And of course, like all very easy in theory as I lay it out on the podcast, but like I get it. Real life is not always so easy. But step number 1 is you say you want to do well. Step number 2 is what you're doing isn't working. Step number 3, do you want help with this? Let's presume this is a kid who's going to say yes, because he does seem to care about school. And then step number 4 is, okay, who does the helping? One of the real challenges by the time a kid is in high school, they don't usually want their parents acting in the role of tutors or coaches. Like that is inherently annoying to them.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Or basketball coach, but yes.
Exactly. You're one of my friends.
I used to be able to help and rebound, but that doesn't work anymore. Yes.
No, exactly.
Like, yeah.
And it's like nails on a chalkboard to them almost.
That's right.
Right.
That's right.
Right.
Yep.
It's even if the advice is great, even if 2 years ago your kid took it happily, right? Like in the normal course of development and individuation is what's going on. Kids wish to be separate. To have their however knowledgeable parents in there working with them on something that is very personal and very deep to them is so bothersome. And I talked about this in Untangled. I cared for a family. I love this so much. So we have the Cleveland Clinic, right? We have a phenomenal medical center here with genius doctors. I cared for a family where the mother was a radiologist at the Cleveland Clinic. And her daughter had a sprained something in her ankle. And the daughter was like, you cannot look at it. You cannot. Like, she refused to let her mother, who was like this super, because like she was a 14-year-old. It was like,
Yeah,
I
yeah.
can't have you intruding with your,
Mm.
so-called medical knowledge,
Wow, that's so interesting that even the expert didn't get to weigh in, the expert
No,
mom.
not at all. Exactly.
Yeah.
So, okay, so that's what we're working with. So I think that families should have this Outsmart Your Brain book. I think that might be a place to start to say, look, one option, here's a really clever book. I've heard good things about it. If you want to read it and try to see if you can apply what it's in there, like that's one option. Another is there someone at school who could work with you on study skills? Is there an online course you could take? I didn't actually look at this, but Khan Academy has all sorts of really
Mhm.
cool courses. And I wouldn't be surprised if Khan Academy or something like it had a how to really study for tests. So I think that the job of the adult in this, of the parent, is unfortunately probably not to transmit something that they have learned and they're excited about and they want the kid to know, but to probably broker connecting the kid who has said, yes, I want help with good help. I think that's the next step.
Mhm. So it sounds like once you know they do want help to sort of figure out how to get them to rethink studying. Great tips in
Yes.
this book that you mentioned, but also looking online to see. One of the things I had suggested for my son who was in ninth grade is something I started doing with my work actually is block scheduling, which is on Mondays, I'm focused on this project. On Wednesdays, I'm focused on this subject. I don't want to work on the weekends, but Sunday morning, I've got to block X amount of time to study and get the reading for this thing done. Does that work with teens and in teaching them study methods like that?
I think, yeah, right? And was he receptive? Did he take it in? Did that work for him?
No, no. No,
Okay.
there's no evidence that he took any of this in for all of the reasons you stated earlier in the
Okay.
podcast.
That's all right, that's all right. They don't always gratify us by doing what we ask. But I think that that's where it's interesting, when I think clinically, I think so often in my practice, I have been saying to my adolescent patients the same thing their parents have been saying, but coming from me, the kid will hear it, but not from the parent, right? So I think that that's
Mhm.
again where,
Mhm.
if you've got a super good idea, maybe get the really cool cousin to tell your kid to try it,
Yeah. Right.
as opposed
Right.
to being the messenger on those things.
Yeah, no, that's really great advice because I find sometimes other kids, his peers have been a great influence on helping to learn, study groups that, he's sought out himself, which I love. Lisa, to sort of sum it up, what do you want to leave parents with that they need to know?
That it's not the same to be good at class as it is to be good at tests. We can talk openly with kids about that, and sometimes it comes at them fast, right? Sometimes it comes at them fast. They've been doing fine, and then suddenly the nature of things changes, and the kid doesn't know what's wrong, and we can, kind of give them a heads up, like, "Oh, yeah, studying for tests
Yeah,
in high school is a completely different ballgame. You
yeah.
can learn how to do it."
I wish I'd had this conversation with you a year ago before we entered high school because I'm realizing much like the topics we always discuss. I know I say this often on the podcast, it's about having that conversation. And midterms and finals, it was never a thought in my mind to have that conversation because I trucked through it and I figured it out. So surely they're going to truck through it and figure it out. And it's painful
It
when
is.
it's difficult for them.
It is.
So, what do you have for us, Lisa, for parenting to go?
I like where we just were around taking any sense that the kids should somehow automatically know this out of the story. I think that if you can say, oh, yes, it's very different to do high school tests than middle school tests. And sometimes that's made clear and sometimes it's not. But it's not about you. And this is something you can fix. I think anytime we can take away any sense of blame or shortcoming and also offer this sense of like, this is workable. You can fix this. It is frustrating, but you're not stuck or helpless. I think, that can push away a lot of the barriers that are sometimes in place to moving in the right direction.
It's so important to get those barriers removed because it can just weigh on you as a high school student, and you can get so down on yourself so easy when it comes to academics. So, love this advice and grateful for it. Thank you, Lisa.
You bet.
And I just want to say the author Lisa talked about, Daniel Willingham, as well as other episodes that might help your student study and get organized. We'll have all of those in the show notes, so be sure to check them out. I'll see you next week.
I'll see you next week.